Infrastructure alone sets New York's 7 train apart. Most of the triple-track right-of-way is elevated through its home borough of Queens, and 11-car trains traverse the line 24/7 as frequently as every few minutes, moving immense crowds between narrow, aging stations. But beyond sheer steel and concrete, this train is the beating artery of an incredibly unique place, with regular riders from around the world. Indeed, the borough of Queens is one of the world's most diverse urban areas, with roughly 47% of residents being foreign-born, and upwards of 800 languages being spoken. It's no wonder, then, that this train is nicknamed the International Express. So how does one properly appreciate this train and the people it serves? As my fiancée Kalkidan and I would discover, the answer would lie in the many wonderful restaurants along the right-of-way.
So we are here at the Port Authority bus terminal, and me and my fiancée, Kalkidan, are going to do a 7-train food tour.
Bling bling.
As we're heading into the subway, let's take a look at the map. The 7 train begins on Manhattan's west side underneath Hudson Yards, then passes the Port Authority bus terminal, where we're getting on, along with Times Square and Grand Central Terminal, before running under the East River into Queens. Here it becomes elevated, as it winds through Hunters Point and Long Island City, crosses Sunnyside Yard, and enters the median of Queens Boulevard. It follows this and Roosevelt Boulevard for the rest of its run up to Flushing Main Street.
So I've been to the station a few times, and this is the first time I noticed this sign. How steep does a ramp have to be to not be wheelchair accessible?
The Americans with Disabilities Act defines an accessible ramp as having no greater than 8.33% slope, or a ratio of about 1 vertical unit to 12 horizontal units, which this ramp greatly exceeds. Gil did his research! Our train consisted of 11 R188s, which were built by Kawasaki and entered service in 2013. And yes, you heard me right, these trains are 11 cars long, the most cars of any New York subway service. Keep in mind, though, that R188 cars are fairly short, so the trains aren't massively long. We emerged above ground in Queens, winding through Hunters Point Avenue in Long Island City before crossing over Sunnyside Yard. This was opened by the Pennsylvania Railroad in 1910, and today serves Amtrak and New Jersey Transit. Then we entered Queens Boulevard, where our first delectable destination would be found.
Main Street bound 7 local train. The next stop is 52nd Street.
So what do you think of the stained glass in all the stations?
I like it. It's like my ring. It has a lot of colors. Yes, today we will be discussing, we'll be deep diving into my ring. Okay, nothing else. Nothing else matters.
Down on street level, the prominence of the 7 trains viaduct really stood out, and there was a lot of walkable density built around its base. Our first destination was Souk El Shater, a historically family-owned Lebanese restaurant. Lebanese immigrants first arrived in New York in large numbers between the late 1800s and the 1920s, with a second wave between 1948 and the 1990s. This restaurant was opened towards the end of that second wave, and is now popular with both Lebanese diaspora and curious foodies such as ourselves. If you're local, you may have heard a rumor of late that they're closing, but don't worry, it's fake news. They've just changed owners and they'll be around for a long time to come.
So Abdul gave us a kibbeh, little appetizer with ground meat inside.
It has cardamom, cloves. You can taste it on the cloves. It's so good.
So then we got some chicken shawarma here. We already broke the wrap in half. Then it's got bell peppers and onions and fries and the shawarma we saw earlier.
I'm sorry, this is the best that I've ever tried in my life.
So are you going to finish that?
Stay away from my food, okay?
Get a person who looks at you the way I look at Kalkidan's food. So then finally we have, what's this called?
Kunafa.
Kunafa.
Yeah. I hear that it's made out of like cheese and then sweet things. It's like a custard.
Okay, so what I don't get is, in this neighborhood, which has some of the most diverse food options from all around the world, some of the most quality foods from every continent, they chose to build a Wendy's. A Wendy's!
Sir, this is a Wendy's.
That's exactly what I'm saying!
When the modern New York subway was constructed, it was mostly built in areas where people already lived. But the 7 train was different. Built in segments by the Interborough Rapid Transit Company between 1915 and 1928, it ran through relatively empty areas to Flushing. Of course, these areas didn't stay empty for very long, as the demand for affordable housing was high, including among the unprecedented numbers of immigrants arriving in the city around that time. By 1930, Queens' population had grown 300% compared to just 20 years prior, thanks in no small part to the subway. We got off at 74th Street and headed south down Broadway, one of several streets in the city sharing a name with Manhattan's famous thoroughfare. A few blocks from the station, we had found our destination, Genesis Authentic Mexican Cuisine. A 2019 survey estimated that about 332,000 individuals of Mexican ancestry lived in New York, with many clustered along the 7 train in densely Hispanic neighborhoods, including Jackson Heights, where we were now.
So here are our tacos de birria. So what kind of animal do you think birria is, just from tasting it? Do you think it's pork or beef?
Beef.
I'm thinking pork. Let's see who's right. Well, this doesn't help. It says birria is a meat stew or soup made from goat, beef, lamb, mutton, or chicken.
And definitely has a beef.
Despite its narrow platform, Junction Boulevard Station was a hub of activity when we stepped off into Corona, another Hispanic-majority neighborhood. And down below the viaduct, street vendors and shopkeepers were hard at work as seas of people rushed around the aging infrastructure.
I feel like I'm back in Ethiopia. We have the same thing. Fresh fruits market.
Our plan had been to visit a Cuban restaurant here, but
It's closed! Sadness. Okay, let's go to the Colombian place next door. We are spontaneously reviewing Mama Letty's. So Kalkidan's gonna try the arepa first. That's this one. Next up we have the empanada, which as you can see has some meat and like potatoes and such.
I would be happy if somebody gives me this in the morning.
Now for the most out there thing that we're trying, the morocho. It's like corn and milk and stuff.
Colombian, Shakira, amazing. Lole, lole, lole. Isn't it so good? It tastes like some nice warm cream.
outside the restaurant, a group of fans were rallying in support of an Ecuadorian football team. I'm happy to report that the Liga Deportiva Universitaria won in the penalty round that night. Back at the station, it was time for our final ride out to the end of the line. Along the way, announcements recorded by local teens played on board the train, discouraging subway surfing. Riding on the outside of subway trains has been a thing for decades, but recently, its popularity has spiked among Queens' younger residents, thanks in no small part to social media, resulting in multiple reckless riders falling to their deaths in 2023. After the Mets Stadium, the 7 train dipped underground to its final stop in Flushing. This neighborhood is the largest Chinatown in New York City, and one of the fastest growing Asian enclaves outside of Asia. It only began to take on its modern form in the 1970s, when a group of Taiwanese immigrants began moving to the area. But today, 70,000 Chinese Americans call Flushing home, according to Queens College, and its food scene is thriving. I was all excited to eat some jianbing, the savory stuffed pancakes I enjoyed in China, but unfortunately, it turned out that the jianbing place was closed on Sundays. By this point, we were pretty full, and there was a Long Island Railroad train heading to Grand Central in just a few minutes, so we decided to bail. But if you'd like to see more of Chinatown, I did feature it in 2 other videos. Link in the top right corner. In a way, I think the 7 train encapsulates a different sort of American dream than the one we're used to. This is a dream where work, rest, and play are a short walk or train ride away from each other, and where one can live far away from home, but still be surrounded by familiar community and culture. It's a dream where everyone belongs, where people of every background imaginable are all crammed into a subway car together, and where a mixed-race couple blends right in with their fellow train riders. And it's a dream where, with 2 feet and a subway fare, one can experience new and exciting pieces of the world without leaving Queens. It makes one wonder, a century later, is it time we think about building more transit lines to underdeveloped areas around our cities? Could a future subway or light rail project replicate the success of the 7 train, creating more people-oriented development like this? Who would move there? We do have orders of magnitude more immigrants arriving in the US now than we did in the early 1900s after all. Where do you think this sort of project could go? As for us, we rode back to Grand Central Terminal and headed back towards New England, our stomachs full and hearts happy. Now, it was time to gear up for a much, much bigger adventure.
I want to take a moment to appreciate the display of sugar right here. A diabetic man is sitting next to Shuki.
Are you done? It's not that funny.
This is Caleb's nightmare. Sugar, sugar, sugar. Honey,
You've
honey,
seen
honey.
me eating cake.
Yeah,
I
right.
literally ate cake about 5 minutes ago in this video.
No, but I'm saying, like, if you had all these cake, you'd be gone. You will see. I'm blind, blind, blind.
No, just, I'm blind.
Guys, I think this thing is so good that we started going nuts.